to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico and the symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
It's the reverse show today.
All right. Let's start.
Mr. Chairman, I guess we'll need a motion to open a special commission meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Second. Have a motion and a second. Please call for the vote.
Wood,
Yes.
Crockett,
Yes.
Henry.
Yes.
All right, next we have public comments and announcements. Are there any public comments and announcements this morning? None?
No public. Yay.
All right. Third thing on the agenda, Mr. Chairman, is our treasurer's report for June 2019.
I don't have any questions.
Very good.
All right. And then on to the June 2019 revenue report with Roberta.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. So for the June 2019 revenue reports, the county ended collecting $16.7 million in GRT this fiscal year, and we collected $25.3 million in oil and gas revenue. The county had budgeted $9.6 million in GRT, which put us over $7.1 million in GRT. And for oil and gas, we were over about $13.3 million, as we only budgeted $12 million for oil and gas. So unless there's any other questions,
I like those numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. Do we need to have a motion to...
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the June 2019 revenue report.
Second. Have a motion and a second. Please call for the vote.
Wood,
Yes.
Crockett,
Yes.
Henry.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, next on the agenda is resolution R-19-81, fiscal year 2018-2019 year-end budget adjustment.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, these are just regular year-end budget adjustments. Most of them are pretty normal. The only ones I did want to point out were at the end of the fiscal year, there were 3 funds that had negative cash balances. And as you know, we can't have negative cash balances at the end of the year. So we did have to transfer money from the general fund into these 3 funds. Those funds were the Farm and Range funds, the Legislative Fund, and the Region 6 Administrative Funds. We ended up transferring $11,000, $15,000, and $15,000 respectively for each fund. So the rest of them were pretty normal, truing up revenue, making sure expenses don't exceed what was budgeted and stuff. So those are the normal budget adjustments.
Any questions?
I don't have any.
All right. We'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the, what do we call it?
The year-end budget. Year-end budget adjustment.
Yeah, R-19-81, 2018-2019 year-end budget adjustment.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. If there's no discussion, please call for the vote.
Wood,
Yes.
Crockett,
Yes.
Henry.
Yes.
Next we have the budget versus actual June revenue and expense.
For the budget versus actual for June revenue and expenses, as a whole, the county ended up collecting over 100% of its revenue, and we expensed about 89% overall. We ended up collecting $146.7 million in revenue and expensed $133.7 million. General fund expenses came under budget. General funds year-end budget was $62 million, and we ended up spending $55.8 million, which left us under budget by $6.2 million. So out of that $6.2 million in the general fund, of course the detention center was the biggest one that was under budget by $2.6 million as a whole. The sheriff's was under budget by $1.3 million, and facilities $860,000. And then of course the rest of them were just, miscellaneous, $40,000, $50,000. But those were the three biggest departments that saved the majority of that $6.2 million. With revenue coming in over budget and expenses coming in under budget, general fund ended up with a surplus this year of $16.2 million. We started the fiscal year with a cash balance of $31.4 million, and we ended the fiscal year with a cash balance of $47.7 million. Road fund didn't end up with a surplus this year. They ended up using some of their cash reserves for the year. They ended up using about $4 million in cash reserves. However, they did finish with about $1 million left over in expenses. So we were coming in close thinking that they were going to go over that, but they actually ended up having about $1 million left over. So unless there's any other questions, that's all I had for that.
I just want to say thank you to all the departments for always staying within your budgeted means and for just basically being responsible in your departments. Much appreciated.
All right, if there's no further questions, we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve budget versus actual June revenue and expenses.
I'll second it. If there's no further discussion, please call for the vote.
Wood,
Yes.
Crockett,
Yes.
Henry.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, next on the agenda is Resolution R-19-82, fiscal year 2018-2019 DFA fourth quarter report.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, so as you know, the fourth quarter DFA report, it's very similar to the budget versus actual June. It's just a summary, a year-end summary of everything we've collected and expensed. It's only in DFA format. That's really the only difference. So I'm just going to go quickly over some of these numbers for the fourth quarterly report. Again, the big number that everybody wants to know is the surplus, what we ended up with, and that was $16.2 million. Overall, the county received $146.7 million in revenue and expended $133.6 million in expenses. Out of the $133 million in expenses, about $16 million of that was for FEMA expenses related. The county ended the fiscal year with $106.4 million in cash and investments total, and we started the fiscal year with $92.6 million. Out of the $106 million in cash, $633 only belongs to the FEMA fund, as we've used most of our FEMA funds up now. So unless there's any other questions, that's all I had for the fourth quarter DFA report.
Any questions? I have no questions, so we can entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve resolution R-19-82. Is that the right one?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. 2018-2019 DFA fourth quarterly report.
Second.
Motion and second. If there's no further discussion, please call for the vote.
Wood,
Yes.
Crockett,
Yes.
Henry.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, next is our fiscal year 2018-2019 fourth quarter lodgers tax report.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, for the fourth quarter lodgers tax report, the beginning cash balance for the fiscal year was $123,000. The lodgers tax ended up with $235,000 in cash. For this quarter, it collected $38,000 in revenue, and total for the whole fiscal year, the lodgers tax fund collected $139,000. For expenses, $9,000 was expensed for the fourth quarter, and there was a total of $27,000 $1,721 expense for the whole fiscal year. I'll stand for any questions if you have any questions on that.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve that we approve the FY 2018-2019 fourth quarter lodger's tax report. I'll get it right.
We have a motion and a second. If there's no discussion, please call for the vote.
Wood,
Yes.
Crockett,
Yes.
Henry.
Yes.
Next, we have the resolution R-19-83 fiscal year 2019-2020 final budget approval.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'll go briefly through the final numbers on the budget. There wasn't a lot that has changed since the last time we met. As you know, once we submit our interim budget to the state doesn't really allow us to make any changes unless we have just cause, basically. There was only one thing that was changed. It was the LEPF fund. We had budgeted $50,000 for that because we didn't know how much money we were going to receive. We received the award back and it was $53,000, so that's really the only thing that has changed from the last time you saw it, from the interim budget to the final budget. But I'll go over the budget numbers briefly before you approve it. So for the 1920 budget, the total expense countywide is $109.8 million, and total revenue budget is $97.6 million. Out of the county's 109 expense budget, $35.5 million is for personnel, which is about 32% of your overall budget. We had $18.3 million in capital overall countywide, and about $55.9 million in operating. There was $5 million allocated to the FEMA fund for this fiscal year. Again, total salaries and benefits countywide totaled $35.6 million.
It's Shorthorn. They're being sent off to Waco.
Oh, I thought it was an emergency.
That's good for them.
Yeah, it's fun. They were gonna come right down.
Live by
Sorry, Roberta.
That's okay.
Is that King's Thursday? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Totally separate.
Yes.
For general fund, we are approving a deficit budget of $9.5 million. General fund revenue is budgeted at $53.9 million, and expense budget of $63.4 million for general fund. Out of the general fund, $63 million, $28.8 million of that is personnel, which is about 45% of general fund. For general fund's capital, it is $3.9 million in capital, and the remaining $30.7 million is operating. General fund's revenue did increase from last year, from $46.1 million to this year $53 million. We did increase GRT this year. We increased it $4.2 million. Oil and gas, we also increased oil and gas this year by $6 million. We're budgeting $18 million for oil and gas production this year. And based on the number that we budgeted for oil and gas production, we are basing that off of $50 price per barrel and about $7 million in volume for oil, 3.6 PPUs, and 33 million volume for gas, and that's on monthly averages. The salary step increases for the fiscal year 1920 have been included in the budget. And if you remember, we still have 20 vacant allocated positions still frozen from, originally it was fiscal year 16-17 that all those positions were frozen. So all those positions still total about $1 million. So I will stand for any other questions that you have on the budget.
No further questions. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve Resolution R-19-83, fiscal year 2019-2020 final budget approval.
Second.
Have a have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, please call for the vote.
Wood,
Yes.
Crockett,
Yes.
Henry.
Yes.
Okay. Next, we have executive session.
Thank you, Roberta.
Next, we have executive session. The board may go into executive session in accordance with the State of New Mexico Open Meetings Act, Section 10-15-1-H2, which authorizes the Board of County Commissioners to go into executive session to discuss limited personnel matters, discussion on county executive management personnel.
Make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Please call for the vote.
Wood,
Yes.
Crockett,
Yes.
Henry.
Yes.
How long?
Shouldn't take that long,
I
right?
don't think so.
Say 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say 20 minutes.
Bye.
See y'all later.
I think so.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I'll need a motion to come out of executive session, as the board did go into executive session in accordance with the State of New Mexico Open Meetings Act, Section 10-15-1-H2, which authorizes the Board of County Commissioners to go into executive session to discuss limited personnel matters, discussion on county executive management.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we come out of executive session and I certify that we discussed and only discuss limited personnel matters regarding the county executive management personnel.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please call for the vote.
Wood,
Yes.
Crockett,
Yes.
Henry.
Yes.
Next, we have take action, if any, on any matters relating to the executive session, limited personnel matters, discussion on county executive management personnel.
Okay. And within there, we are going to attempt to schedule interviews on August 8th, pending interviewee schedule. That was the only action taken.
Does that need to be a motion?
Yeah, why don't we have a motion, since we discussed it in the closed, I think go ahead and have a motion to attempt to set these based on interviewee schedules for the 8th.
So I'll make a motion to attempt to schedule interviews on August 8th, pending interviewee schedule.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, please call for the vote.
Wood,
Yes.
Crockett,
Yes.
Henry.
Yes.
Okay, last thing is to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Please call for the vote.
Wood,
Yes.
Crockett,
Yes.
Henry.
Yes.